Myth or Reality? Minority Overrepresentation in Special Education by Maria Aleman. I know that overrepresentation is a reality, since I am an ESL teacher who is responsible for the education of students who are in general and special education. In my school, I have seen the population of Learning Adaptive Behavior Program cluster classes change from predominantly African American males to an equal number of Hispanic males. Few white, Asians, or females are assigned to these classes. The proportion of students does not reflect the school population. Special education for the mildly retarded, is much of it justified? Dr. Dunn believed that special classes for children with mild disabilities was ineffective and indefensible. He contended that inappropriate testing was used to misidentify many minority and underprivileged children as mentally retarded or emotionally disturbed. Placing disadvantaged minority students into segregated settings was a civil rights issue. The Education for All Handicapped Children Act became a law. It guaranteed a free, appropriate public education to every disabled child. The name of the law changed to IDEA, and it established rules and regulations regarding significant disproportionality. It required states to collect and report data on special education enrollment. Evidence of disproportionality was still obvious, and the law was changed in 2004 to make districts reporting overrepresentation use 15% of their IDEA funds to create early intervention so later special education could be prevented. Disproportionality is overrepresentation of a particular group, comparing that group's proportion to the general population. States chose the methodology and the threshold to determine overrepresentation. Using different formulas to determine overrepresentation presented a problem. IDEA must move to a national method for determining the overrepresentation. This is a look at special education students in the New England states for the school year 2013-14. It is obvious that 3 of the New England states have a large Hispanic enrollment in special education. Underrepresentation is caused when students are underdiagnosed. Why? Morgan et al. Say that educational professionals are less responsive to minority parents, teachers have low expectations regarding African American children's abilities, educators ignore neurological basis of low academic achievement and problem behavior. Schools need literature explaining eligibility procedures to become more parent-friendly. Morgan et al. Found in the study of their data that African Americans are underdiagnosed in the categories of learning disabilities, speech and language impairment, intellectual disabilities, health impairments, and emotional disturbances. Having worked in schools, I am more prepared to agree with Skiba and the other dissenting researchers. 2 different studies, one by Skiba et al. And the other by Zhang et al., state that the predictors of placement into special education are race, with African Americans being the highest in intellectual and emotional disabilities. Native Americans and Hispanic numbers are growing in this category. Males are being referred 1.5 times more often than females. ELL students are overrepresented in behavioral and emotional disabilities classes, as well as learning disabilities. These studies also concluded that the causes for placement of ELL students are over-reliance on IQ and achievement tests, lack of interpreters, lack of bilingual assessors and bilingual reports, absence of information of classroom instruction, and alternative strategies prior to referral, assumptions regarding families, excluding or demeaning parents, and insensitivity to parents. Eligibility decisions must be minimized so that there is no cultural linguistic bias. Many educators suggest that poverty contributes to special education placement. Teachers are unprepared to meet the needs of low SES students. Since racial minorities are overrepresented in the low SES, poverty tends to be a proxy for race. Teachers are hesitant to talk about race. Kincaid and Sullivan authored Parsing the Relations of Race and Socioeconomic Status in special education disproportionality. This study used the tripartite model of SES, parent education, occupational prestige to look at special education placement. They concluded that neither low SES nor occupational status had an impact in the placement of students into special education. Skiba et al. Report in their study, The Context of Minority Disproportionality, Practitioner Perspectives on Special Education Referral, that cultural bias leads to overdiagnosis in the categories of emotional disturbance and intellectual disabilities. The result of that diagnosis causes the removal of the child from general education classes. The special education system offers a substandard curriculum to students who need the most academic enrichment. There are cultural gaps and misunderstandings which cause or worsen behavioral challenges. The Zhang et al. Study, Minority Representation in Special Education 5-Year Trends, concluded that when there was poor quality of teaching, behavior issues, or misunderstanding of the student's culture, there was often a special education placement. Mislabeled students receive inappropriate education services. One method to prevent this is the adoption of RTI. Since schools usually use academic standards that are aligned with white middle class and English speaking students, schools need to create a culturally responsive environment. A way to do this would be the adaptation of culturally responsive teaching. This would create positive perspectives on parents and families, communication of high expectations, and the introduction of learning within the context of different cultures. Dever Raines et al. Conducted research titled Addressing Disproportionality in Special Education Using a Universal Screening Approach. BESS is a screening tool which is simple to administer and score. This instrument would give the school information on behavioral and emotional issues any student might have. Parents and students fill out surveys which are scored by adding up the value of the answers. There is now a Spanish version. Special education services are more beneficial for milder academic-based disabilities. These students usually spend most of their time in general education classrooms in a minimally restrictive environment. Special education is usually ineffective for students removed from general education classes. This was noted over 40 years ago by Dunn. These students have lower achievement across subject areas and a worsening of emotional or behavioral problems. I prefer to look at research that is quantitative in design, but after reading Harry and Fenton's Risk in Schooling, the Contribution of Qualitative Research to Our Understanding of the Overrepresentation of Minorities in Special Education, I became aware that much information can be garnered from qualitative research. All the researchers suggested that there be more research, but Harry et al. Requested that the research be qualitative. There is no simple explanation, and definitely no simple solution. The outcomes of disproportionality means more students are likely to be placed in a situation out of the general population. The future of these students will be difficult since they have not had high standard academic training. If they complete high school, they will have fewer supports related to work, college, and community living. I wonder and worry about the future of the students with whom I work. I know that their instruction is not as vigorous as general education. Looking at the data through different years, school populations are changing, but special education programs are still primarily populated by male minorities. We need to be diligent about doing the best for our students. What do you think?